You've made it through college, maybe even run the gauntlet of the MCAT, and now you've got your sights set on a few medical schools. Time to put together your applications, which will include a personal statement. Problem is, you're a scientist, not a poet. And now you really need to flex your writing skills. And this is where so many students get stuck. You see, you could put together prose worthy of Jane Austen, but if it isn't authentically you, sufficiently motivating with impressive enough achievements, the med school administrators are gonna be about as moved by your application as a lead balloon, which doesn't bode well for you. Okay, so that might be a little dramatic, but the point is, making your medical school personal statement stand out from the crowd is a major challenge all graduates face. And so today, I'll be talking to two experts from BeMo Academic Consulting, which helps students get into the professional and graduate programs of their choice. Their names are Sumeeta Farrukh, a master's degree wielding admissions associate, and Dr. Meng Yang. Yes, Dr. Yang, but don't go there. I'm sure she gets Grey's Anatomy jokes all the time. Anyway, so without further ado, here's what Dr. Yang and Sumeeta have to say about how to write a compelling medical school personal statement. Okay, guys, tell me, what is a medical school personal statement and why do med schools torment students by asking for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what it is, essentially, it's an essay answering the question, why medicine, or why do you want to be a doctor? And there's a few reasons why med schools ask for this. It's because there's no other component in the application that tells admissions committees what your motivations are for pursuing medicine, right? So it's not enough just to have a strong academic profile. They also want to make sure that you're applying for the right reasons. And this is one way for them to assess that. It's also the first assessment of your written communication skills, which is really important to have as a physician. And then it's also one source to see what professional traits you have that make you suited to the profession. So things like interpersonal skills, leadership, problem solving, professionalism, they're going to be looking for evidence of that in your personal statement.
Right, no pressure, hey?
Yeah.
All right, so in broad strokes, what are the points your personal statement should make?
Well, your main goal is really to answer the question that Sumeeta just shared with us, why medicine? Because the admissions committee wants to know your genuine motivations for wanting to be a physician. Beyond that, any point that you include, any argument that you include in your statement, you'll want to back it up with evidence from your personal experiences, and that's why it's called a personal statement.
Right. Okay, cool. All right, well, now taking the points that you've mentioned, what is the anatomy of a great personal statement? You know, like how long should it be? How should it be structured and formatted, etc.? Yeah.
The length of these statements is typically around 5,000 characters, but it really depends on where you apply to. Different schools have different requirements. And we recommend that you structure it like an academic essay. So with an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And now just to break down each of those a little bit more, for the introduction, the first paragraph, it's very important that you make it captivating. It's very important that you set yourself apart as a candidate. That's where you want to stand out first. Yeah. And you want the reader want to keep reading more about you. So some of my favorite statements start with a sentence or two that transports the reader to an impactful moment in the applicant's life that sets the tone for the rest of the essay. And then they creatively tie it into the main theme of the essay, why medicine?
Yeah.
Intro can also serve as a roadmap to the rest of your essay. So in the last sentence, it's always nice to see the applicant lay out the big points that they're going to discuss, and that gives you a good sense of what's coming. Now in the body paragraphs, typically, we recommend including 1 to 3 significant experiences that confirmed your decision to pursue medicine. You can devote 1 paragraph to each experience, for example, and within those paragraphs, you'll want to also discuss, of course, what you learned from the experiences and how that makes you a good fit for medicine. For the conclusion, another important paragraph, as it's the last impression that you're leaving your readers with, and so you want to make it strong. You want it to creatively tie in all of those big ideas that you just discussed. And you want to leave the reader wanting to know more about you, because that's what's going to get you that interview invitation. Right. So it again should be captivating, it should be insightful, and it should be inviting for that person who's reading it to get to know you.
Right. It's just, as a professional writer, I know how much experience it takes to write a compelling story, which is what you're doing, essentially presenting the story. You want to meet me. You want me to learn at your school. And for someone to go from studying science, which, I studied science too. And one of my biggest criticisms I received in my thesis was that it was too emotive. And so it's very dry. You're leaving out emotion. And now, having been trained in the sciences, you now have to transition to becoming a storyteller. So it's good that we're chatting to you guys, because there's lots to cover as far as making that transition is concerned. So on that subject, tell me, what mistakes do you most often see students making with their personal statements?
Yeah, so as Meng said, lots and lots of things to think about, and it's obviously a little bit trickier for those coming from STEM backgrounds, as you mentioned, having to learn to pivot to creative writing. It's not the most intuitive thing sometimes, so it does take some time. And so one of the mistakes is just starting too late, rushing the writing process. It's not a document that you want to treat very lightly. It's so important, so students can either underestimate its importance or just underestimate how long it might take. Yeah. So start early. I know it can be a scary thing to start, that personal statement, but the earlier you start, the better it's going to be. Having a poorly written essay, one that lacks structure, that contains spelling and grammatical errors. Again, keeping in mind, this is an assessment of your written communication skills. So everything's got to be impeccable in terms of the structure and the grammar, all of that. And then another mistake is also not actually answering the why medicine question, which is the whole purpose of the personal statement. So it might tell a really great story, it might be very well written, but if by the end the reader doesn't understand why exactly you want to pursue medicine, then it hasn't actually served its purpose. So you've always got to bring it back to, what are they actually asking? And then not having a second set of eyes reading that personal statement. So you should always have somebody look it over to help with all of those above things, catching those errors, making sure that you're including the right content. Ideally, somebody who knows what med schools are looking for, who can provide that objective feedback about the strength of your essay and the content that you're including. Because again, it's not always intuitive. So having that reassurance is really good. And then just a couple more. So there's quite a few, but one of the two of the biggest ones I would say is including too many experiences. So it starts to sound like a CV or just a list of things that they've done. And you've got to keep in mind that there's lots of other documents, lots of other areas in the med applications where you will be able to list all your other activities and describe them in further detail. But as Meng said, the personal statement should focus on about 1 to 3 of the most significant ones that have really contributed to that journey. So those are a couple of the things that I would say.
Okay, cool. And then over and above good MCAT scores, what looks particularly good on a personal statement? What might students do during their pre-med years that will reflect positively on their applications?
Well, everyone's journey towards medicine is different. There are lots of diversity. There's lots of diversity in the candidate pool, and that's a good thing. So I don't want to say that there's a single thing that's going to give you that leg up. But I think one important thing you want to demonstrate is your understanding of what being a physician actually entails, because otherwise all those other points that you say about why you want to be a physician will fall flat. Right? It's not really convincing to say you want to do something if you don't have a good idea of what it is in the first place. So that's probably an important thing to have in your application as a whole, and probably in your personal statement. And of course, the obvious experience that comes to mind is clinical experience. And that's because that's the most direct way that you can get a feel for the medical profession and what a physician does day in and day out. But it doesn't have to be just that, right? You may have worked with vulnerable populations through community service, for example. And you might have found yourself wanting to continue to serve them as a physician, knowing that physicians have the privilege and the responsibility to serve and advocate for the health of people in their communities, especially those who are marginalized and more vulnerable. So there's lots of different avenues, right? I think medical schools typically look for well-rounded candidates. So we always encourage students to go out there and explore their passions, not just through physician shadowing and clinical work, but also through research and extracurriculars, sports, arts, whatever they find interesting. There are lots of different ways in which you can develop skills and competencies that would make you a great physician. And I think admissions committees like to see that you're able to learn those skills and apply them in a variety of different contexts. So having that diversity in your application is great as well. And the last thing I'll say is when you're choosing activities in those pre-med years, prioritize quality over quantity. Engaging in fewer but longer lasting and more impactful activities is much better than hopping around and doing a lot of different activities for shorter periods of time just to check off boxes. It becomes very obvious when you're doing that. So I'd say a good level of commitment is at least a few school terms or even a couple years, depending on what it is. And of course, sticking with an activity for longer helps you to develop the skills and grow as an individual. Prepare you for medical school. And it also gives you the opportunity to step into leadership roles. And that's an obvious plus for your application.
Yeah, to view it as personal development and an opportunity to sort of understand what you could do one day, as opposed to just, as you said, checking off boxes and trying to build an impressive and compelling application. It's like, this is your opportunity to see how you could fit into the healthcare profession and where you can serve best. Okay, well, on the subject of volunteering, is it okay to name drop? If you have volunteered somewhere prestigious or your family is well connected, does it serve your cause to kind of drop names all over your application, or is that kind of regarded as obnoxious?
Yeah, great question. Like anything else in the process, I would say that it depends. So it's definitely okay to mention names. So lots of people get into programs without having worked with really big names. And then lots of people have also been rejected despite having worked with big names. So probably not a very important deciding factor. But again, you can definitely include the names of those you worked with. It would be pretty weird if you went out of your way to not include names. But again, more importantly, it's important to select those activities that really shaped your decision to pursue medicine and enabled you to develop those skills that make you a really competent physician. So again, they care more about what you do, what you learn from that, and not who you worked with. Although you definitely, feel free to include that as well.
Okay, cool. All right, so we've covered quite a bit of ground on the do's and don'ts of a good personal statement, but now here's the question we ultimately want the answer to. How can you make yours stand out from the crowd?
Well, I think the short answer is make it personal. Another mistake, if I may add to Sumeeta's very generous list, is people use a lot of cliches and it all starts to sound like every other application. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to use overused phrases like, I want to help people. You want to connect on a personal level. And you can just simply do that by drawing from your personal experiences. Anyone can talk about why it's great to be a physician, but if you can relate those reasons to your own personal experiences and what you've been doing, as well as the lessons that you've been learning from those experiences, then it's very unlikely that another candidate will be able to say the exact same thing.
Yeah. So even if you followed a very similar path, if you speak about it authentically from a very genuine perspective and vulnerable perspective, I think that's transparent in your writing. Okay. And finally, tell me, how does BeMo Academic Consulting help students with their med school applications?
Yeah, so what we do, Thea, is we provide a personalized strategy for students at every single stage of the process. So we always like to start with an application strategy session, and that's where we teach students how they can actually reflect on their unique journeys, and then together we brainstorm ideas for their applications. So as mentioned, a lot of students do similar activities, which is pretty natural if you're in the pre-med track, but we want to help them realize what's unique about their own experiences and how that really helped them come to this point. So we start with that, and all of our admissions experts, they're all experienced practicing professionals, such as doctors, for example, who are trained specifically for the admissions process. So they know what med schools are looking for, and they know how to bring out the best in our students. So once they have their first drafts ready, we provide them with feedback on what's good, what needs work, and we teach them how their essays can be more effective. And we actually do unlimited reviews. So we keep reviewing it over and over and over again until we are 100% confident that it's ready to submit. And then we take that same approach there to the rest of the application. So things like Casper, things like interview, we teach them foundations, we give them that realistic practice, and then we give them that feedback right away, really comprehensive, so they know what to work on. And so we do that for every component, and that same holistic success approach is what has helped thousands of our students actually get into medical school.
And then you also do residency programs. Is that true? Would you help them?
Yeah. So once they, get into medical school, and then later on they're getting ready to apply to residency, then we help them. Same strategies again. We help them reflect on what specialties they want to go into and why, and how their experiences in med school brought them to there, and then helping them with the personal statement. So very similar approach.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me today. This has all been really interesting. I think we've provided a ton.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, there you have it. How to make your med school personal statement stand out, as well as some of the things to include and steer clear of in order to get into the medical school of your choice. Well, if you'd like even more hands-on assistance, which guarantees that you'll get into any graduate program, get in touch with BeMo Academic Consulting. Details provided below. If you are preparing to take on the MCAT, make sure you get Brainscape certified MCAT flashcards in your corner. We have distilled down and organized the science content you need to know into an awesome collection of smart flashcards, which are proven to help you learn and remember content twice as fast as traditional study methods. Armed with these, you'll keep up that healthy cadence of daily review that is so essential for landing high scores on the MCAT. And for even more guidance, check out the other videos we have on Brainscape's medical channel, including more interviews like this one. And go to our MCAT Academy for free study guides on everything you need to know to prepare for and ace the MCAT. These tools, together with your ambition and hard work, is everything you need to rise to your challenge.